Can I ask you, I mean, because you've been inside the Fox complex, or you've reported, you have deep connections and have reported out from there. You know, the arrangement between Trump and the National Enquirer was explicitly symbiotic, right? Literally saying, we want a story about Ted Cruz, go publish, go write one. And the National Enquirer would fabricate one, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that Trump even, does he have the access to even be able to have an arrangement like that at Fox News? I mean, he communicates directly with Sean Hannity.
Yes, he does with individual hosts, not with the network as a whole. Lachlan Murdoch, who runs Fox, is in Australia a lot of the year. He's not wired in the way that his father Rupert was, or the way that, you know, other moguls like David Pecker were. Lachlan doesn't want to be, but Lachlan wants to keep the business humming. And this is all about business. That's what exactly is the same with David Pecker and the Enquirer. This is entirely about a financial relationship. They believe they have a fiduciary, you know, what's the word?
Fiduciary.
They believe this is the responsibility they have to the shareholders to keep the pro-Trump propaganda going, to keep the viewers watching. And then what you'll see on the air on Fox, when they interview voters, the voters are saying the exact same things that Jesse Waters is saying.
Right. Well, it's a feedback loop. I mean, from a legal perspective, this seems like terra incognito to some degree, right, Lisa? I mean, I was struck by last week when the jurors, literally multiple jurors, were saying, I'm worried about my safety. And Judge Merchan said, I am directing that the press simply apply common sense and refrain from writing about anything that has to do, for example, with physical descriptions of the jurors. That's just not necessary. It serves no purpose. I mean, he's asking the press, and that included the mainstream press, fairly. Yes. But, like, is his ability to circumscribe the amount of information put out there as it concerns the press reduced to just requests, or is there anything legally he can do to guard against this?
I think many of us in the press who were in that room took those requests more as a directive. As he continued in that court transcript, it became clear that it wasn't really much of a request at all. And there were some people in the room who were really bristling at what they perceived was an incursion on their First Amendment rights. That having been said, I want to go back to something that you and Brian were discussing about the feedback loop, because I do think that there is a point to the gag order in that you're cutting off some of that feedback loop. I noticed
the Trump of it all.
The Trump of it all, which is to say, you know, one of the things that struck me is Trump took something that he liked that Jesse Waters said at 5 o'clock. He added to it and made it more insidious. And then 3 hours later, that entire thing comes back out of Jesse Waters' mouth. To the extent that the gag order succeeds in interrupting some of that feedback loop where Trump gets amplified by conservative media, but also is taking from conservative media and that stack of articles, the things that he likes.
Yeah.
That might be a good thing, particularly when the DA's office is arguing republication is a violation of the gag order in and of itself, which is something that Todd Blanche argued to the contrary. He said, you know, the gag order prohibits making statements or directing others to make statements. It doesn't prohibit publication. The DA's office almost laughed at that and said, Your Honor, this isn't a totally fair analogy, but defamation law prohibits republication. If you can be held liable for republishing somebody else's lies, why is it okay for him to do it in the context of this gag order?
But don't sleep on this. When he's sharing these lies from Fox, he's misinforming himself as well as his fans.
Yeah.
Like, he's actually getting a warped sense of this trial, of the surroundings, of why his fans aren't showing up to the courthouse, which cracks me up that he thinks that thousands are being denied entry when no one really wants to come. He's being misinformed.
Yes.
Which, by the way, really hurt his presidency, and it's hurt his post-presidency as well. All of us in our lives, we need someone to tell us the truth.
Yes.
To tell us when we got ketchup on our tie, or when there's hair dye dripping down our face. It doesn't seem Trump has that person. Instead, he has the opposite. He has these people that lie to him on television every day and every night. And I would argue that probably hurts him over time during this trial.
Do you think removing him from part of the feedback loop changes the sort of mendacity over at Fox? I mean, because Jesse Waters came up with these juror conspiracies independent of Donald Trump. Remember that Donald Trump theoretically just retweeted, you know, an edited version of what Jesse Waters came up with. Right. And I just wonder, does the toxicity level decrease at all if the gag order is more punitive?
If it's enforced, which is the other thing.
Question.
And, you know, I want to point out, Alex, something to you, because the dynamic between Merchan and Trump now is very much a parallel to the dynamic between Trump and Judge Lou Kaplan, who oversaw both E. Jean Carroll trials. There was a moment, and excuse me, because I'm reading from an NBC News article.
You're allowed to use your phone.
Where at the last trial, he said, Mr. Trump, I hope I don't have to consider excluding you from the trial. I understand you are very eager for me to do that. And as Trump was walking out of the courtroom, I remember him like sort of pounding the table and go, I would love that. I would love that.
Well,
and that's sort of the dynamic dynamic that's going on with Merchan, and Merchan knows that too. And so the trick for him is to hold out the stick without actually hitting Trump with it.
Well,
but be credible.
And that is something, I mean, we started this segment talking about the ways in which Trump is running right up to the line. Right-wing media is saying, go get arrested, sit in a cell for 6 hours. It's not only going to be great for your brand, it's going to be great for fundraising. We have details. I think Trump raised $5.6 million in the first week of the hush money trial, an average of $1 million a day. He knows where his bread is buttered on this.
It's so perverse that all of a sudden these law and order Republicans care deeply about the humanity of the criminal justice system. Right? Jesse Waters is comparing Trump's treatment to Guantanamo Bay prisoners. I fantasize, and I know it's not going to happen, that we're going to see some movement as a result to actually improve the prisons and the courthouses and all of the rest. I know it's not going to happen, but it's incredible to see how they're waking up all of a sudden to what it's actually like to be a criminal defendant.
Right. Well, it's as it concerns one particular person who might face jail time.
They're God. That's what this is about. They are worshiping their cult leader.
Why haven't we gotten a ruling from Judge Merchan on this gag order yet?
Well, Judge Merchan is a very, very careful jurist. He said yesterday at the end of the hearing that he wanted the parties to give him any additional authority that they wanted to bring to his attention. You'll recall that he invited Todd Blanche to cite case law to him that said essentially that republication was not a violation of the gag order. He did not. So both parties had an invitation to give him more between Tuesday night and today. I suspect we'll see something from Judge Merchan tomorrow or Friday in writing that he'll read from the bench and then make available for the public to see. In the meantime, the DA's office has told us they're going to file a third order to show cause with respect to some additional statements. And then just yesterday, while we were at the trial, Donald Trump, I guess before the trial, must have done an interview with a news outlet in which he said some of the same things about Michael Cohen that have gotten him in this pickle in the first place. So, you know, the escalation is happening even before the verdict or the ruling comes out on these existing violations.
Yes, poking the bear quite literally. Well, hopefully the guardrails will narrow tomorrow when the trial begins again with Dave Pecker on the stand. Lisa Rubin, Brian Stelter, no two better people to talk about this with. Thank you both for your time and wisdom this evening. 11 Arizona Republicans met on December 14th, 2020 at Republican Party headquarters in Phoenix and signed documents representing themselves as the duly elected and qualified electors for President and Vice President of the United States of America from the state of Arizona. And then they transmitted those documents to the National Archives and to Congress for counting by Vice President Mike Pence on January 6th. Even though Joe Biden had won Arizona by more than 10,000 votes. And you know the rest. Now, tonight, Arizona Attorney General Chris Mays has indicted those 11 fake electors on felony criminal charges, along with 7 other co-conspirators affiliated with Trump's 2020 presidential campaign. Those co-conspirators are names that will be familiar to you. According to reporting from multiple outlets, they are Mark Meadows, Trump's former White House chief of staff, Rudy Giuliani, Jenna Ellis, John Eastman, and Christina Bobb, all of whom were lawyers advising or representing Donald Trump in various post-election lawsuits and schemes, along with Trump campaign officials Boris Epshteyn and Mike Roman. Now, the 11 Arizona fake electors were part of a multi-state scheme to help President Trump overturn the results of the 2020 election. But tonight marks the first time that criminal charges are being brought in the state of Arizona.
We're here because justice demands an answer to the efforts that the defendants and other unindicted co-conspirators allegedly took to undermine the will of Arizona's voters during the 2020 presidential election. Arizona's election was free and fair. The people of Arizona elected President Biden. Unwilling to accept this fact, the defendants charged by the state grand jury allegedly schemed to prevent the lawful transfer of the presidency. A state grand jury made up of everyday, regular Arizonans has now handed down felony indictments for all 11 Republican electors, as well as several others connected to this scheme. These charges include fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. These charges are Class 2, 4, and 5 felonies. These are serious indictments.
As for Donald Trump himself, he is not charged in this indictment, but he does appear as unindicted co-conspirator number one. Joining me now are NBC News correspondent Vaughn Hilliard and Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent. Lisa, first, my first thought when I read this was, okay, who's going to plead out? Just because we saw a sort of similar scenario minus Trump or plus Trump in Georgia, and we've seen plea deals there. And I just wonder, this is a relatively wide net, 18 people in this. Yeah. Is your expectation that some of them are going to plead out and become witnesses for the state?
Yes, although some of the usual suspects are already unindicted co-conspirators here because they chose in advance of the indictment to cooperate. Namely, Ken Chesebro appears to be unindicted co-conspirator 4 in this indictment. There is also no role here for Sidney Powell, who is the other person to have pled out in Georgia. On the other hand, you have all 11 Arizona alternate or fake electors indicted here. Chances are that more than one of them will eventually plead out and give their cooperation.
It is notable that, Vaughn, that Kenneth Chesebro seems to be, and this is according to some reporting in the Washington Post, that he seems to have been an important source in all of this. And I'll read an excerpt from the Post reporting tonight. Chris Mays, the Attorney General, had been squarely focused on local conservatives up until late last year. Then Arizona prosecutors and investigators met in December with Kenneth Chesebro. Chesebro provided Mays' team with records, some previously unseen, that revealed more information about those involved in the Arizona effort. After that, they said the Arizona investigation widened. How did she go about this, Vaughn? Because it sounds like she started kind of near the top, which is the inverse of how, I don't know, the DOJ has approached the January 6th related controversies.
The Arizona targets were the easiest of targets because, as you said, Alex, they did it out in the open. They were openly tweeting about it. They were openly posting the video of what they did on December 14th when they signed the certificate, the fake certificate, and sent it to Washington, D.C. These other 7 individuals, the likes of John Eastman to Rudy Giuliani to Christina Bobb, that are still redacted in this indictment because they have yet to be actually served here. These were individuals that were tougher targets here in part of a greater a conspiracy that is outlined by Chris Mays. This investigation we first reported on this last summer, and clearly she had, I guess what you could call easier targets. She could have just focused on the 11 electors, but Chris Mays, who came into office in January of last year, clearly intended to target and make it clear that this conspiracy was not only a threat to the 2020 election, but also the 2022 election and potentially future elections, and clearly made the decision to proceed in cast a wider net. And if I may, what is notable about her indictment here is the fact that she specifically outlines the fact that she contends that the 11 electors, and as well as these other 7 who are indicted as well, that were Trump attorneys or Trump campaign officials, that they intended to deceive the Arizona voters. I just want to read part of this. Defendants deceived the citizens of Arizona by falsely claiming that those votes were contingent only on a legal challenge that would change the outcome of the election. In reality, defendants intended that their false votes for Trump-Pence would encourage Pence to reject the Biden-Harris votes on January 6, 2021, regardless of the outcome of the legal challenge. I was there on the ground in Arizona as all of this was unfolding, Alex, and I can tell you I remember so distinctly that they were just making the case that, well, this is just an if in the scenario we actually found fraud, that Mike Pence could then go this route. But what Chris Mays is outlining in this indictment is that this was a conspiracy intended for on January 6th, or in those 2 weeks to follow, to seat Donald Trump as president, whether he actually had 270 electoral college votes or not.
Yeah, and we actually, I was struck by the same passage in the indictment, Vaughn. Can we bring it back up again? Lisa, this seems legally very, very significant, that the sort of cover under which some of these fake electors have operated, not just in Arizona, but in other states. Well, this was a contingency plan. She completely disassembles that in the indictment.
I thought that passage about the email sent from unindicted co-conspirator 5 to a Pennsylvania attorney is really damning because it says, also, just FYI, I recall now there was a rush to file our petition in order to give legal cover for the electors in Arizona to vote on the 14th. That email is stunning. And that has been in the public domain before. In fact, you can identify from other public reporting who the unindicted co-conspirator is. But I had forgotten about these details. It's just like many of the details and the hush money trial that's currently going on are things that we have known for years. So, too, is this an email that's been out in the public domain. But juxtaposed against all of the litigation that was filed in Arizona, to see it one after the other fail. And then this admission from the unindicted co-conspirator, oh, by the way, this was the cover. We were supposed to file this other lawsuit in order to give legal cover to the fake elector scheme.
We're giving you a reason.
Correct.
And it's all there. Vaughn, when we talk about the ways in which this is an effort on the part of the AG, not just to seek accountability for what happened in 2020, but to, I think, ensure against future fraudulent election behavior. You pointed this out in a conversation with my colleague Chris Hayes last hour that, some of these people who have been indicted are still very much involved with the Arizona election infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Right. And let's just use Tyler Boyer as an example. Tyler Boyer is not going to be a household name to most folks, but he is the RNC committee man from Arizona. So he is the one that at every RNC meeting, winter meeting, summer meeting, he's the one that has a vote for Arizona that picks the chair of the party, for example. He is the person who is not only one of these fake electors indicted, but also RNC committee man, but he's also the chief operating officer of Turning Point USA, which is the Charlie Kirk organization, the Trump-aligned organization that has garnered millions of dollars and has effectively taken over the Arizona Republican Party in recent years. Tyler Boyer, Charlie Kirk, they're close with the likes of Kari Lake, Abe Hamadeh, who was the opponent to Chris Mays in the Attorney General's race in 2022 and was an election denier. And there's been a lot of frustration in the Republican Party from some folks who have been around the Republican Party for a while with individuals like Tyler Boyer, and it's Kelly Ward as well, who came in and sort of had this revolution, right? They ousted the likes of John McCain. They ousted Jeff Flake. Kelly Ward ran against Jeff Flake for the U.S. Senate in a Republican primary. And Jeff Flake dropped out because he was losing in polling to Kelly Ward. And so all of these years later, these folks effectively took over the party, are still effectively running the party. Their allies are the ones running for office here. And there is little in Kari Lake's Senate run here in 2024 is evidence of this. It's the same allies of these very individuals that we're naming in this indictment here, along with folks like Boris Epshteyn, who is also an indicted in this, who continues to be the lead counsel advisor, legal advisor for Donald Trump's 2024 campaign. All of these folks are still very much in the game. So it's not just a matter of 2020 as a bygone era, making good on trying to bring justice to past actions, but these are folks that are still intimately involved with what is happening over the next 6 months ahead of the 2024 election, Alex.
Just to that end, Lisa, what do you foresee as the sort of handshake between the Georgia case and the Arizona case, given the overlapping defendants in both? I mean, the fact that Jenna Ellis has pleaded out in Georgia, does that suggest to you that she's going to plead out here? I mean, what can we map from Georgia onto Arizona?
It's difficult to say because the facts are different and some of the communications also are very different. One thing that strikes me, though, is who isn't here. And that's obviously the former president of the United States, who's not a defendant here. And that leaves many people scratching their heads as to why not. I'll venture one guess. On Thursday, that's tomorrow, the United States Supreme Court is going to hear Trump's presidential immunity argument. He has made presidential immunity arguments not only in the federal election interference case, but also in the Georgia case, also in the Florida case. One reason that Chris Mays may not have indicted Donald Trump here is because she wants to see how that plays itself out first and also give some of those indicted a chance to flip against the bus.
Just when you think the screw has turned all the ways it can, there is another turn of the screw.